Hello, everyone. So it strikes me that cities are the ultimate platform for sharing. Today, we're going to talk about the evolution of the sharing economy and my experiences with it and all of the ebbs and flows and perhaps a bit of optimism and hope about where we're going next. So a little bit about me. I live in San Francisco. This is my car, it's now sold. People don't actually work on a beach, but it's fun for a picture. I do live and work from anywhere, including here. And I wrote a book through all my experiences titled, It's a Shareable Life. One of the things that I realized when I shared my apartment, so I utilized couchsurfing and Airbnb, was that when people slept, 15, 20 feet away from me and I trusted them first, there was a really different thing that happened in relationship development and in the transaction, if you could even call it that. It was more of an interaction. Hey. So in writing the book, we had to decide, okay, so what is the sharing economy actually? And that's definitely come into question many, many times in the last half a decade or so. So we decided it's an underutilized resource with peer-to-peer exchange that enables people to save or make money enabled by digital networks. That last part, enabled by digital networks, is quite potent because without that, it's just sharing. So sharing 1.0, mapping data and networks to information and things. So this is Craigslist, right? Craigslist turned into a company for almost every single category, including ride sharing and accommodations, you name it. So at this point, strangers united. People were meeting each other between the bridge of a thing. They were sharing their data, their files, and eventually physical things by mail, transacting with physical stuff, eventually sharing time, and then their homes, and then their cars. We can imagine that going from sharing where we work on LinkedIn and leaping into eventually opening up our cars and our homes is a giant, giant leap that the internet enabled. So sharing 2.0. This is a cultural and thematic shift. One of my favorite parts of the sharing economy. It's where we were able to see the human connection revolution and the potential of transaction being something really meaningful to unite our human relationships and help us feel more connected, not less. It was a new way to exchange value. So I did a lot of couch surfing. I ran around Italy and other places, and I would meet people, random strangers, and we'd go on trips together. We'd share, and what we found was that actually, even if someone was hosting me, they felt like they were giving, the opposite. Even though we both felt like we were receiving, whether one person was giving on the giving or receiving end of the equation, which was quite powerful. It made me realize that a transaction is not a line. It has the potential to actually be a circle. So some examples of sharing 2.0. Couch surfing, free cycle. Free cycle enables anyone to give and receive items that they no longer need. Time banking, which equates to 1 hour of my time being worth 1 hour of your time, regardless of what the skill is. You could be a lawyer and I could help you garden. So it's local and global, which is also powerful, right? So it's these locally driven networks. For example, Free Cycle has an email list group, that's how it started, for every single location, and people can actually transact with one another and gift one another in their local neighborhoods. But it's also global in the sense that there are over 8 million users. So sharing 2.5. This is where things get a little shifty and where we are now, which is not so fun. For me, this is the shift from human interaction to increasingly being about efficiency and mechanization and automation, less about citizen assets and time, and more about just getting things done faster in a more business efficient way. It's this movement from the sharing economy, from gifting and receiving to the gig economy, and a further movement to the automated economy. This is where we see centralized platform dominance, your Facebook, Airbnb, et cetera. mass global expansion, tons of venture capital going into these companies, and luxury as a service. You know, I live in San Francisco, so you can get just about anything delivered and live like a queen. So where we are now is algorithm-based and based on incentives. I believe that we can base things on incentives, but positive incentives. There's a focus on money and efficiency, less on human interaction, and more about efficient, inexpensive labor and a race to the bottom. Okay, we're gonna continue getting dystopic for a second, and then we'll move back out and zoom out. So the question becomes, is the sharing economy just like a thing to dodge regulations and allow for a less expensive labor and not accounting for people being actual employees? You know, Uber and Lyft recently had IPOs. The founders made lots of money. And then you saw things like Instacart using tipping for actually paying their drivers and their shoppers. And then Airbnb, also looking at that, like an increase in Airbnb listings is also an increase in rent prices. That's actually been proven now. So sharing 3.0, we're gonna zoom back out. This is the remapping of money, value, and incentives. This is where blockchain comes in, and I hope you've heard a lot about that while you've been here. So this is interesting. This is a map of marketplaces. So we moved from B2B and typical B2C to C2C and C2B. What does this mean? So peer-to-peer sort of marketplaces and business-to-peer sort of marketplaces. This is showing that we're actually moving to decentralized marketplaces and then eventually pure C2C, which we can't even possibly understand yet because we still have networks and platforms and all of these things. Imagine that everything just moves around fluidly. That's the future. So to ground this a little bit, we moved from B2C, which is essentially a taxi service, right, into Uber, which is provider to provider or peer-to-peer. And then Ernst & Young came out with this great idea. They're like, let's come up with this fleet of electric cars where insurance and fuel and everything is included, and it'll be tracked by blockchain, and everybody will own the vehicles, and nobody actually needs to own one, but we can use any of them anywhere all over the world. And then pure C2C, well, that just doesn't exist yet. So what did I learn from all of this? Light bulb 1. The value of data, time, content, assets, and resources is more valuable than the technology that enables their distribution. Some examples. I'm sure you've heard this before, but Uber asks their drivers to use their own cars and yet is the biggest taxi company. Airbnb, people use their own time, their own resources, and yet is one of the top hotel brands in the world. Facebook, same thing. We're creating data and content and media, and yet no one's really being compensated yet. So this is a look at maybe what your data is worth via a data calculator. And actually, Facebook is coming out with something interesting called Facebook Libre, which scares me a bit because if we map currency and incentives to our behaviors, and there's a potential for there to be a score behind that or something of that nature, what does that look like? Are we moving more toward a social score like China has? This is an example of Presearch, a blockchain company, blockchain-enabled company that allows for search, where you're actually paid to search, and it's a private search, versus Google, where they're essentially taking your data and not really telling you, and then backing out of it later. Light bulb number 2, value creators, the hosts, the drivers, the people that are actually using their value. And this is all over the internet, this is all over every single platform, this is all over business. Should have ownership in the things that they create through their efforts and their assets and their time. So Kevin Kelly, in the 12 Forces That Shape the Future, said, the new methods of equity sharing would unleash tens of thousands of innovative businesses that could not be born otherwise. The sharing economy would now include ownership sharing. This is a really, really powerful subject. And Airbnb is in on this mix too. They've realized, okay, well, where's our value coming from? It's coming from our hosts. So they've actually filed with the SEC to be able to do this. Light bulb number 3. This is one that I'm still mulling around with, but If we can tie value and incentives to actions, we can fundamentally program technology with our values. So this is especially applicable to cities. If we want to incentivize people to recycle or vote or create community dinners, we can do that now with blockchain technology and incentivization. And the final one, this is where value being a circle comes back in. Perhaps money is only needed to match wants and haves, and in a perfect economy is not actually needed. Stephan Hendrick agrees. One purpose of money is to distribute goods and labor. In the future, we will be able to solve these tasks differently, without money, instead relying on the help of networks, algorithms, and artificial intelligence. This is moving more towards the pure C2C. So the principles of sharing economy 3.0, shared ownership over access, trust over fear, value distribution over profit, replicability over scalability, ecosystem over independence, crowd over individualism, alignment over control, and local over global, but locally connected interdependent systems. This is a space that I have in Italy called Alchemy Spaces to continue with these conversations. Please reach out. I'd love to chat with any of you, and thank you very much for having me.